welcome back to Genesis Custom Sabers. This is just going to be a quick tutorial, a quick little rundown of how to change out the switch on an Ascend saber if you want to replace it with a momentary switch. For instance, if you wanted to upgrade your saber to a Nano Biscotti sound card from Plector Labs, they only work with momentary switches, and of course slide switch that comes with the Ascend is not a momentary switch. So what we're going to do is we're going to move really quickly through this. Now I've taken apart the pommel of the saber. You probably may not need to do that initially because this is actually a little bit more simple than you might think. The rubber O-ring will slide off. Now these can be a little bit tight, so what I do is I get a rubber glove. You probably don't even have to put the rubber glove on. You just use it for traction, and it grips the a leather glove, and it grips the rubber, pulls that off. Now your O-ring's out of the way. You need your Allen key, and what you want to do is this is not righty tighty, lefty loosey. You actually want to tighten this in one full turn clockwise, not too far because you don't want to drive the screw into the LED. So you just want to do one full turn clockwise. You take the Allen key out, and what you're going to be able to do is now slide this collar off. And you can just rest it out of the way on your rubber O-ring here. If you want to take it all the way off, you can. I'm not going to for the purposes of this tutorial. Then you can just pop out your slide switch. Now this one I've already disconnected. You'll notice that there are two wires that are run from the slide switch all the way back to the electronics. I've already, like I said, disconnected this one. So what I'm going to use is a pair of needle nose pliers, and I'm just going to reach in and I'm going to gently pull out these white wires, two white wires, and with my finger, with just really light pressure, I'm just going to pull them this way to give them a little more slack. I don't want to pull straight out. I actually want to pull towards the emitter, and if I'm just gentle and tug, you can just pull these out. You probably only be able to pull them out a little ways. You really don't need much more than about an inch of slack. That's perfect. Okay, now I'm getting ready for the next step. As you can see, I've stripped the wires, and there's just a tiny bit showing there. And I always like to twist the wires to make sure they're twisted nicely. And what I'm going to do now that my soldering iron is heated up is I'm going to tin these wires before I go any further. I don't want them to fray on me. I want them to adhere to the switch really nice. So I'm just going to a little bit of solder on the ends of each wire, and they are now ready to go. I'm also going to prepare my switch. This is the kind of little tactile momentary switch that you can get at Custom Saber Shop. I don't know if you can see that. It's a little long for this. You can file it down. I'm just going to use this as identical, just it's a beige color and it's a little bit shorter. But with this switch, you've got leads coming out both ends. I only need the leads coming out one end, so I'm going to snip these off right there, like that. And they still stick out a little bit more than I'd like, so I'm going to file those down with a file or a piece of sandpaper, and then I'm going to attach my switch to those leads, and that will be the next step. Okay, I'm ready to go. So before I go any further, I got my helping hands here. I got my switch ready to go. I've got 3/32 heat shrink. Comes in strands like this, and I've snipped off about an 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to put an 1/8 of an inch over each of these wires. Sometimes you solder things and forget to put the heat shrink on, and you have to unsolder it. Do it again. In this case I remembered, and I'm going to put my little switch in my helping hands. I filed off the other side, and all I'm going to do really is just line these up, and I'm going to solder these wires. If I can get it in a way that I can actually see what I'm doing and video at the same time. Get both of those sides nice and heated up. I check my joint, make sure it's not a cold joint. Looks good, feels good. Probably going through this really quickly if you're new to soldering, sabersmithing, that kind of thing. But doing a job like this is actually pretty straightforward. And if you practice solder on a couple of things that don't matter before you get into the jobs that do matter, you'll learn this really quickly. Okay, so now I've got my switch, I've got my wires, and I've got my heat shrink. Now I'm going to pull the heat shrink out, get those sleeves ready to go. I want to make sure that everything's going to fit before I heat up this heat shrink. Make sure my switch is going to fit in there. Oh yeah, it's going to be nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this up. Then when I'm ready to install it, I'm going to switch it over so those wires have a nice curve to them, and the switch is going to sit in there like that. So I'm going to I'm going to heat up that heat shrink so it shrinks down. I'm also going to use my hot glue gun, and I'm going to put a dab of hot glue on both of the nubs that I sanded down of the remaining switch leads. Remember, I cut those off just so that those don't actually touch metal and short circuit to anything. They're not going to once we have this position in there, but I always like to be redundant and make sure that there's more than one way to protect your electronics. So the hot glue is a great way to insulate those things. So I'll get things set up and we'll be right back. Now, there's a little bit of metal showing where I've shrunk down the heat shrink, so I'm just going to put a little dab of hot glue on these corners as well, just to make sure that they're fine. Sometimes you can do that if you want to keep the wires positioned where you want. And that hot glue is going to get nice and cool. Now what we're going to want to do is to position the switch. We want the wires, we don't want to pull the wires back through this way. We want to give them lots of room and give the switch a nice position. So I'm going to want to position it like that. But there's too much wire. So now what I want to do is I want to go to the other end of the saber, and I want to pull out the electronics a little bit and pull on my white wires just to, you can see that they're pulling up the slack just a little bit. I always want to do that very slowly and gently. Now I want to seat the switch perfectly right in its spot there, and depending on your hot glue, it may be a tight fit, it may not, and you want to press down not too much until you get it about level. Okay, now if you were to assemble it at this point, it may stay in there, but there's always a chance that you can flick it forward and rock the switch. So you don't want the switch rocking forward. What that can do is it can place movement on soldered wires, and anytime there's movement with soldered wires, you can eventually break them free. So we don't want that. We want it to stay nice where we've put it. So what I've done is I've got this little plastic. Now this is the kind of plastic, I don't know if you can see, it comes with any electronics. So I've drilled a hole that matches my switch. The switch passes really easily through it. And so what I did then is I took a pen and I basically traced around this footprint of this indented area around the switch, and I made myself just a little clear spacer, because I like the light from the LED to shine through. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place that down, and that's going to hold the switch in, and it's going to keep it secure and able to move and be active. But to add a little extra cool factor, what I've done is I've made a piece of white paper with Arabesh writing on it. All I did was I wrote ACT, or activation, on my computer, printed it off in a bunch of different sizes, found the size that I liked, matched it up with my little spacer, and what I'm going to do is this is the first time I've actually tried this, so I don't even know if this is going to look as cool as I hope it will, but I'm going to place these things down here. As you can see, I've got everything to line up now. Off camera, it took me a little bit of fiddling with it to get everything to line up perfectly, so that your not just so that your collar slides over there, but also so that the Allen key lines up here. But I just want to test it. I've got my battery plugged back in, so I press my button. Saber comes on. This is a nano biscotti in here, so it requires a momentary switch. As you can see, the lettering is backlit for kind of a cool effect. And I want to hold the button again. So now that I know that it's working, I want to go in here with my Allen key, and I want to back it off that one full turn. So this would be, I'm essentially loosening the screw to bring it out, to put tension on this collar. Don't have to go too tight, just tight enough to keep it on there. And I put my ring back, and now I have successfully upgraded, or changed out rather, the switch on my Ascend Saber, something that works with the Nano Biscotti. Some people who don't like the slide switches, a momentary switch. It's kind of cool. So give it a try. Should be a pretty straightforward job. You don't have to take apart much of the Saber, and have fun. Thanks for watching.